Good evening, everyone. First thing I want to do is thank all of you for coming out this evening. This is going to be a great event. As you know, we are here to discuss the all-powerful mayor and recent events. But before we get started, I'm going to give you a couple ground rules. And before I go there, I also want to thank Ida B's Table for making this thing possible. As you know, yes. They are the destination place for modern soul food in Baltimore City. So if you have not placed your orders yet, if you have not been kind to your servers yet or your bartender, now is the time. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the order of events here. So the first thing that you're going to see tonight is a news package that was done by Stephen and Taya. I think they're right here. Yes, our two reporters, Stephen Janice and Taya Graham. So you'll see a news package that is going to be based on the topic for this evening. Shortly after that, we're going to hear from our panelists that are behind me. And right after that, we're going to take audience feedback. So you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Yes. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions. I am going to ask you to please keep your comments to 2 minutes. We have a counter up here. So you're going to keep your comments to 2 minutes. The lovely 1 minute for Shorty, okay? Y'all are making me forget my order. Okay, all right, and so after that, we're gonna follow up with your ideas as to what we should report on next, whether we need to follow up with what's going on tonight, whether we need to report on new issues, new subjects, so we wanna hear from you and what you think. And we're also gonna ask you your feedback on this event in its entirety. Like, what do you think about it? What could we change? What could we do better? What did you like? So all of that being said, I'm going to hand this over to Eddie Conway. Thank you so much for coming out, everybody.
Yes, again, thank you for coming out. We all know recently there's been a lot of allegations about corruption in City Hall, et cetera. So this panel is actually not about any individual, but it's about the power of the mayor. And we're concerned about how we balance that power out in the future so that it'll benefit most people in the city. So toward that end, we brought some experts that has looked at the city, has been involved with the city, and is working with the city now. But before we get there, I want to show you a package.
Once a year, Baltimore City holds a so-called Taxpayers' Night, where residents are asked to share their thoughts on the state of city government.
I think it's very disgraceful, just in general, to be involved in such a mess. Baltimore has been known for corruption within the government, and it just doesn't help.
And this year, in the wake of a burgeoning scandal involving Mayor Pugh, there was one reoccurring opinion: she should resign.
I do believe she should resign, and just because it's the best interest of everyone else. As the rest of the city council already said, I saw it.
The mayor has been embroiled in a controversy over the sale of her Healthy Holly children's book series to a variety of local institutions. The sales netted her about $800,000 in total. At this press conference, she said all the deals were above board.
I also want to make it very clear, I never intended to do anything that could not stand up to scrutiny.
But the controversy has also prompted a criminal investigation by the state prosecutor's office. And for some residents, the need to scrutinize City Hall and the all-powerful mayor system that defines it.
Just because so many communities are underrepresented and, not really heard, I believe there should be an equal playing field where representation is not just on one sole body, and that, other people that can step up and really represent communities' needs and get things done and make change.
In Baltimore, the mayor has a firm grip on every facet of governance, from the budget to the spending board that approves contracts. Johns Hopkins history professor Matthew Crenson says the city's strong mayor system dates back almost a century.
It was rooted in a charter of 1898, which occurred at a time when what passed for a democratic machine in Baltimore, which actually was never very much,
and was created to bring order and stability to an otherwise chaotic city hall.
And so reform administration came in. And one of the things they wanted to do was to disempower the city council because they saw it as a center of corruption.
But now some say the concentration of power is at the root of the most recent scandal and needs to be changed.
I think it would be better for the city if that power was constrained or restrained by the communities in a way.
The power of the mayor expanded during the era of the so-called shadow government in the 1970s. Then Mayor William Donald Schaefer used them to create quasi-public agencies like the Baltimore Development Corporation, which allowed deals with developers to be hashed out in secret. That's because real estate, finance, and bondholders prefer an all-powerful mayor who they can manipulate.
The whole issue of income concentration and how that's at the underpinnings of so many of the different domestic policy problems that we face. Definitely on the local level, it would be, I suspect, easier to address if the power of the mayor and the power of the council were more equal, because the council is closer to the people and more directly responsive.
Henry says for real reform, you need more democratization, increase the power of the city council, and have the council more accountable to voters.
So there's long been a tremendously unequal power dynamic between the mayor and the city council. I really think it's incumbent on all of us to work to straighten that out.
This is Taya Graham and Stephen Janis reporting for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland.
I want to introduce the panel. So to my immediate right is Bill Henry. He's the city council person for the 4th District. He's been in office since 2007. So he knows where the bodies are buried too. To his right, the mayor, former mayor, Sheila Dixon. She doesn't need an introduction. But just by way of background, she was in the city council for a number of years. She rose to be the president of the city council. Around 2007, she became the mayor, and she was the mayor for until 2010, and she's still here working in the city. To her right is a professor, an activist, a scholar that does a lot of research on what goes on in the communities. It's Lance Brown from Morgan. Okay, so before we start talking about the power of the mayor, we're going to have to get this other thing out the way. What's happening right now with Mayor Pugh? She's at a leave of absence. The city council has completely, unanimously called for her resignation. She says she's coming back. I'm curious, Bill, you're on the city council. Does the city council have a position other than if she comes back, what's going to happen?
Well, if she comes back, she's going to come back to being the mayor of Baltimore, because that's what our charter says. The Charter of Baltimore, as currently written, offers absolutely no method or mechanism for the removal of the mayor against the mayor's will. If the mayor should stop being qualified to be mayor, then they would automatically vacate the office. So if the mayor stops being 25 or older, if the mayor stops having lived in the city for the previous year, or if the mayor stops being a registered voter. And that has been that last one is the hook that has been an issue in the past. If the mayor is convicted of a felony, then the mayor would be removed from the voter rolls and therefore ineligible to be mayor. But at the risk of speaking for my colleagues, the call for the mayor to resign was out of a belief that she had lost the moral mandate to lead. That is an opinion. It's something that I can believe. It's something that anybody in this room can believe. It's something that anybody in the city can or cannot believe. But in terms of legal power and in terms of what the law holds, that is just an opinion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just to clear the air here, Mayor Dixon, you've been through a similar kind of situation. Do you have any idea of how, like your situation this is, or the difference? And what do you think Mayor Pugh should do?
Well, first of all, our situation is different, and I'm not going to go into the details of my situation compared to hers and what she's going through, but I will say this. At this point in time, we have an election in 2020. There's a lot of turmoil going on in the city, even before we found out about Healthy Holly, et cetera. No offense to my colleague, Councilman Bill Henry, who I've known for a long time and who's been a great councilman in his district, along with various initiatives that we worked on. But I think even if Mayor Pugh stays or leaves, what people don't understand is that the whole structure then changes, which I'm not going to say that ex officio Bernard Jack Young can't move the city forward and continue to build on what's going on, but then you're also going to have a turnover in the city council. And to be honest with you, it's just like what's happening behind the scenes with the late Bush, Speaker Bush. I mean, people are politicking to see who's going to get that position. And that's the same thing that's happening right now as we go through this process with the mayor. So, make a long story short, this is challenging times, and it's going to be time that all of our agencies, and this is from my perspective, being a mayor of this city, understanding how city government works, understanding how the budget process works, and understanding how we as citizens deserve services based on our taxes, that every agency needs to continue to stay focused on fulfilling the mission of their respective agency. Picking up the trash, dealing with these potholes, dealing with this traffic, dealing with the crime with our new commissioner who's being paid a really nice salary and is getting ready to revamp the police department. I mean, every agency has to really take on and become leaders within this process over the next year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so all this started around, it started obviously about the books, Healthy Holly, but since then it's been grown beyond that. It seems like there's some allegations in reference to contractors doing business with the city and money being transferred to allegedly to the mayor's LLC. And I'm wondering, is that, and I'm born and raised in Baltimore, so I, in fact, know the answer to that. Is that how business as usual is done in the city? And what do we do about it? Lawrence, I'm going to ask you that.
Thank you. First of all, it's a great honor to be here, especially on a panel hosted by Eddie Conway. So you all give this brother a hand. My man. And a great honor to be here with these guests as well. This is the way Baltimore has run, I think, historically. With the strong mayor system, the risk that you run is that if corporations are aligned with the mayor, if they have their hands in their campaign finances, if they're able to sort of sponsor them, they don't really need a lot of the council members to get on board. And so you have this inordinate control in the hand of one person. And I believe it's Kanye, my students corrected me, I said Jay-Z, but no one man, no one woman should have all that power, right? No one person should have all that power. And I think that's the fundamental issue that this corruption raises. Now, I will say it's bigger than Mayor Pugh, and I hate that a lot of the media, not the real news, but a lot of the media has focused inordinately on her. I think if she steps down, then a lot of those corporations, their CEOs need to step down too. A lot of the corporate leadership, because what they did was perverted our democracy. That's what they did. They put the needs of corporations over the needs of our communities, over the needs of our people. And as a person who comes from public health, to have a medical institution actually be involved in this inordinate amount of scandalous corruption, it hurts, because you remember the patient they put out on the street last year, the lady they had. So they undermine patient care. They also, that's money that could have been used for lead poisoning, for violence prevention, for rec centers that we discussed here before. So that's money. The corruption then has an impact on red line black neighborhoods. It has an impact on patient health care. And so I think that that's the scope that we have to look at. The Frank Kellys, the Speaker of the House who just passed, the State Senate President, Mike Miller, all of them were on the board. So all of them need to be scrutinized.
Can I just,
Yes.
can I take a stab at that? Because he's
Yes.
looking at the bigger global issue of different corporations. I want to kind of bring it back to the Board of Estimates. And yes, we do have a mayoral control system, but that doesn't mean that because you are the mayor, that the city council president, that the controller, and that the council doesn't have a role in that process. Yes, the mayor has 3 votes, but what happens is, and I'm going to go back a little bit to when I was city council president and Martin O'Malley was mayor. And as city council president, one of the things that I always did was I would look at the Board of Estimates and I would look at the contracts, and I would, on a regular basis, bring in the various agencies to go through those contracts to raise questions. But as president, and this is something that, and this is not taking anything away from Council President Young, but one of the things that I always try to do was scrutinize those contracts. I even would hold up, because keep in mind, I have control of the agenda, the city council president. The controller has some control as well, because she puts together the agenda with the items on it. So it goes through, those contracts go through her office. So many, many times I would hold it up.
Yeah.
If I saw that there wasn't any minority participation and things were wavered, or if I saw where a fee was going to be increased and to me it wasn't justifiable, I would hold it up until we got answers. And then in some cases, I would hold it up until those agencies would make changes. So the question is understanding, and that's the piece where I believe some mayors have issues and they allow the private entities to control them versus them controlling what they need to see happen within their agencies. Because you need to check everybody's financial statements and records and who they get funding from. But because you get funding from a particular business person does not mean that I'm going to go and jump over and do what you tell me to do. Because it has to be in the best interest of the taxpayers. And a lot of times, some mayors lose sight of that. But there are other elected officials who could put the screws on. And I'm going to give you an example of a current contract. And President Young was a little upset with me. But I felt that the police commissioner's contract should have been scrutinized and that we should have started him at a lower rate than $275,000, as well as not pay him to go to community meetings. I don't know if you're aware of that. That was in the contract, along with him being able to, and I'm not saying that this guy might do a phenomenal job, but I just believe that it should have been challenged. The conduit contract that was passed recently, first by Stephanie Rollins Blake at $65 million, and then $100 million under Catherine Pugh. I don't know if people realize, but there are 2 powerful pieces that the city has in its control. Our water, which the state was trying to take control of because we supply water to Harford County, Baltimore County, well, we don't want to give up that control. Well, under Martin O'Malley, he had a task force and wanted to give control and create this state entity. And our conduits, because all the cable and companies, et cetera, connect to the conduits and they pay a fee. And it all started with the whole deal at the state with BG&E. But my point of it is that to let that pass and not question it, and you're on the Board of Estimate as an elected official, you're the controller, you're the president of city council. To me, when I read that in the article, I was like beside myself, because I said to myself, how could they do that? But that's, so there's a process that other people also, even though the mayor has 3 votes, there are other things that can happen even before it makes that agenda, that other elected officials can have a say and use some of their power as well.
Okay,
So-
you want to say something? I want my expert in for a second.
Mayor, I just want to say, with all due respect, the mayor never loses on the Board of Estimates. I mean, I've sat in Board of Estimates meetings year after year after year, and the mayor never loses. Eventually, the mayor gets what he or she wants.
Actually,
Every time I
Go
want.
ahead,
yeah, actually, so
I mean, if I miss something,
one of the things that I was going to point out is I'm actually on my 3rd term or my 3rd tour of duty in City Hall. Before I was on the council, I worked as a staff person in the council president's office under Mary Pat Clark when she was council president, and then Lawrence Bell. And before that, I interned as an undergraduate in Mayor Schmoke's office. Your first semester as a council person, and his first semester as mayor. One of the things that I learned working in the council president's office is that the mayor never loses a public vote at the Board of Estimates. That does not mean that there are not some times where the council president or the controller who have the opportunity to address issues that were proposed to be on the agenda. Sometimes those items are pulled before they become part of the public meeting, and sometimes things change before they come back and are then passed. And those are not big public victories for the opposition, and they're not big public losses for the mayor. That is the potential power. But what do you want to do?
Well, no,
more
I'm
of
just
that?
saying, but that illustrates the problem. As we, the media, can't even know what's going on and don't see it, then it's kind of,
And that's why I was going to
that
take
illustrates why it's better to have a balance.
That's why I wanted to take this back to the larger question
Right.
of the strong mayor, and I wanted to make a point of bringing back the connection to Mary Pat, who isn't here with us tonight, except in spirit, and Mary Pat and I have argued about the strong mayor system of government, good-naturedly, medium scholarly, for going on 30 years now. And the strongest point she has made about the benefit of the strong mayor system is, with the strong mayor system, you know who is to blame. There is no real finger pointing with the strong mayor system. The mayor can try to evade responsibility. The mayor can try to say that the council did this or the council did that. But largely speaking, the benefit of the strong mayor system is the good that happens in Baltimore and the bad that happens in Baltimore can be laid at the mayor's feet with a pretty solid sense of accountability. The other bad thing about the strong mayor system is everything that we've been talking about here tonight in terms of the dangers of concentrating power. The phrase is absolute power corrupts absolutely. I don't know that I would say that the mayor has absolute power, but the mayor has an awful lot of power compared to, and this is what I've made a point of looking at over the years, compared to the power dynamic between other mayors and other city councils in other cities across the country. There is literally no other city anywhere near our size where the power dynamic between the mayor and the city council is as unequal as it is here in Baltimore.
Okay, I'm looking at my time, and I want to deviate a little bit because the strong mayor system, from what I recall, has been making a lot of public-private contracts with billionaires and multimillionaires over the last 30 or 40 years, 50 years in fact, and they have given away almost everything that the city owns. And this had been rubber stamped, I believe, by the city council because the city council don't have any power. And I hear you saying that we can have somebody to blame, but when I go up to Gilmore Homes or when I go in the hood and look at the difference of the conditions in the hood, and then I see what the inner harbor look like, and I recognize that people like Kevin Plank is getting $500 million in tips, we're gonna pay. We're gonna pay. And if it goes bad, we'll pay for the loss. So the strong mayor thing is really not the best. It's not working for us. It hasn't been working for us. So is there an alternative? Do we give the city council more power and make them accountable? How do you feel about that, Lawrence?
Well, I think we have to democratize our city government. We have to, I would say, abolish the Board of Estimates. I would abolish the Board of Estimates and put more power of budgeting in the hands of the city council. And I would actually democratize the budget even more by making participatory budgeting more of a feature of the way that we actually allocate our resources in this city. As a lot of people here may know, I actually advocate for Baltimore neighborhood reparations. And so as a part of that, 10% of our budget will be allocated towards red line black neighborhoods, and those residents in those neighborhoods, they would be able to come together and decide how the money they get would be spent in their community. So I'm for participatory budgeting. I think we do need to lower the threshold for a mayoral veto. Instead of making it, I believe, around 75%, make it like 50% plus one, whatever that number would be in the city council. I do think we have to do a lot to rewrite the city charter overall and make democracy matter in Baltimore City.
Same question, Mayor Dixon. I heard both of your answers, but
I would support not necessarily eliminating the Board of Estimates, but only having the 3 elected officials on the board. That way you have equal votes. Now, that has to come before the voters. Secondly, as it relates to the budget, and this is something that I shared with a lot of the new council people before they came on board, I shared with them, I said, you have power that you have to figure out how to manipulate around the system to use that power, because I was a city council person under a time where the council had the power and the mayor didn't have the power. And this is when Mary Pat Clark was the city council president. I came in as a new council person. They stripped her as her power with the ability to appoint people to committees, and then they stripped Schmoke's power to some degree with the vote count. It was called the Dirty Dozen.
Oh, right.
It was called the Dirty Dozen. I said Schaefer? No, I'm talking about Schmoke. That's when Schaefer, I was a kid. Schmoke. So if you weren't a part of that Dirty Dozen at that time, Schmoke had a hard time getting things through. And Mary Pat didn't have the power either because the committee assignments were assigned by the Dirty Dozen. And I was a new council person. I had no knowledge. I was trying to learn. So I didn't get into the Dirty Dozen. I wanted to support the leadership of the city council. So my point in saying this is that the council has 2 ways to use their authority right now, unless you make changes. One, with the legislative process, because somebody mentioned about a TIF. Well, here is where, under my leadership as city council president, when Martin brought a TIF before the city council, we just didn't turn over and pass that TIF. we made sure there were certain requirements within the TIF of black equity in those deals down at Harbor East, where minorities were able to participate, and the Hilton Hotel was a prime example of that, and local jobs were given to young people, not just verbally, as what happened with the state money, the Century 21, where folks do things verbally, but then when it comes down to the dotting the I's and crossing the T's, nobody's checking to see if you have local people working at these schools, but really making sure that we created a person who actually oversaw that process. And then the budget. The budget is where the council can use their power if they use it correctly. By cutting. They don't have the power to increase it, but they have the power to cut budgets. And so a lot of times to get things done in their district, it's going to take them cutting something out for the mayor and others to listen. So there are some ways, but you have to know how to move the system in order for it to work for your constituents. Because the bottom line is, when you get into this business, you should be doing it for the people of this city, not for yourself. That's just my...
Okay, and we heard your opinion, but you want to add something to?
So
Well, no, it's okay, go ahead.
I guess specifically to the question of, is it a good idea to abolish the Board of Estimates, or would it be better to restructure the Board of Estimates in a
The question was, can we have a city council with more power to balance out the inequities of the mayor's power?
If you abolish the Board of Estimates, like New York City doesn't have a Board of Estimates. You know, the
excuse me, Bill. Henry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can call me Bill. That's cool.
I want to know. I want to know if we could have a stronger city council. The Board of Estimates is those 5 people.
No,
I understand that.
But where I was going
Are you
is,
going there?
yeah, I'm going there, is that, for example, New York doesn't have it. They've moved a lot of the contracting and purchasing power that used to be in their Board of Estimates into their council.
Oh, okay.
And so their council has more power. If all you did was take the mayor's other 2 votes off the Board of Estimates, that would give the existing power of the mayor to whatever 2 of those 3 elected officials can agree on any given week. That wouldn't give any more power to the council. I'm just making that point. One of the things that has been suggested over the years is that if you took those mayor's votes off, it would be like the Board of Public Works at the state level. But at the state level, the state treasurer, who is one of the 3 of the members of the Board of Public Works, that state treasurer is appointed by the General Assembly and is there to represent the interests of the legislature. And so if you either let the comptroller be chosen by the council, with the understanding that the comptroller is there to represent the council's interests on the board, or if you let the council choose its own president, so that the president of the council is on the Board of Estimates representing the council's interests. Because one of the things that I've heard council presidents, most often the one I've served under now for most of my tenure, one of the things I've heard said a lot is the council president represents the council on the Board of Estimates. That's not really true, because the council did not elect the council president. The people of Baltimore elected the council president. And I think that's an important distinction when we're talking about this kind of structure in government.
Okay, my question is pretty simple. Would each of, especially the former mayor, the current city council member, have talked about components of the charter? Mm-hmm. Nobody's talked about changing the charter.
Oh, yeah.
And what aspects of the charter should, I haven't heard anybody, especially you, Mayor Dixon, you talked about how you can work within the system that you have, but I haven't heard you say anything about changing the charter or changing the system so that it works better from it, and then what does that look? And so that's number one. My next question is, and then if you were to, I know you got to put a body of people together to work on the charter change, hopefully bring it to the vote to the city, so people have a say in that. But more importantly, from my vantage point, if you do that, if you do the charter piece, from where you sit, current city councilman, former mayor, from where you sit, what would be the 3 or 4 things that you would want to see changed in the charter, almost that you, if you were on that committee, that you would fight for? That's my perspective and question.
So that's an easy one for me because I feel confident saying that I think I'm possibly the living member or former member of the city council who's introduced the most charter amendments in their tenure, none of which I think have passed. Since I've been on the council, I have introduced a charter amendment to change the budget process so that the council could. I'm not saying I was the first person to do all of these, but I'm saying that as recently as the last term, I put in a charter amendment trying to give the council the ability to add money in the budget instead of just being able to cut it, so that it would make it a little bit more even of a budgetary power with the mayor. It also eliminated the mayor's line item veto. The mayor has a line item veto for the budget. So if the mayor doesn't like any of the changes the council made in the budget, the mayor can veto just that change right now. If you want to talk about the 3 most important, I think that's the second most important. The most important is to reduce the veto override threshold from 3/4 down to, I was being conservative saying 2/3, which is in keeping with the federal level, the state level, and many other cities our size look at a 2/3 level for overriding a veto. And this one is a little bit more controversial. I think, honestly, that the city council should be differently comprised. I think that we have a council right now with 14 single-member districts because there were people who felt it would be better if the districts were single-member rather than the old multi-member districts that we had. They wanted them to be single-member so that you could target a particular council person if you didn't think they were doing a good job. They couldn't hide behind the other 2 members of their team, like often seemed to happen. But the downside of that is, with all of these different smaller districts, no council person has that much say, and worse, now for larger issues, it's harder to build coalitions of support inside the council when you used to start with automatically having 2 other people whose problems were going to be the same as yours because you all represented the same area. It is easier for the mayor to marginalize a member of the council now when all they represent is 1/14 of the city. Because if you're a mayor who really, really doesn't like a city council person and wants to make that displeasure known by making it hard for that council person to get stuff done, yes, those people in that district that you're making life rough for are also going to be mad at you, the mayor, but they're only 1/14 of your base when you're the mayor. But now those people are really unhappy because their council person doesn't seem to be able to get anything done. If we had larger districts and fewer members of the city council, then the council would have more power dealing with the mayor, and it would be harder to marginalize them. But then the flip side of that is, if you're really happy right now because you see your council person all the time, because it's easy to be at every community meeting when you only have a district this big, if your districts are much bigger so that the council has more power, you're going to see your council person less. And that's why this should be a public conversation. I mean, I'm really happy that the Real News Network is doing this, because between now and next summer, is the time we have to talk about charter amendments before they would have to go to the Board of Elections to be on the general election ballot next November. So this year, we should use this year to have a public conversation about what do we want from our government. Do we want to vest more power in the council rather than the mayor? That's good to know, but we all need to understand that there are going to be trade-offs for that. Having a less powerful mayor sounds like a great idea when we're unhappy with the mayor. Having a less powerful mayor also means if you see a good mayor coming down the pike, that you're excited about their vision, and you're excited because they understand what Baltimore needs to do, but then they get in there and they can't implement their vision because they no longer have the power that we're used to mayors having. We're going to be frustrated then in a completely different way than we're frustrated now.
Okay.
So, but let me just real briefly, just to take the examples he used.
Briefly?
Just brief.
Okay,
To
all
take
right.
those examples, those charter changes would have to be introduced in the city council. In the city council, they become ordinances, and people have to come down and testify, and the council has to vote on it. And then those items and those changes, if it's a smaller council, if it's giving them the authority to move money from where they feel it needs to go in the budget versus just having the authority to cut it, then it goes out to the voters. And so ultimately, the voters make the decision for these changes that are taking place. And I think Councilman Henry made a good point. This is the time to have that discussion. The other reason why it's a good time to have the discussion is because we're coming up against the census. And we have to look at the city and look at what's happening here in the city and the reduction of population in the city, which also plays into how city government is also being run and how we have council people as well as, authority or power or no power for the mayor. But this is the time to have that conversation.
Bottom line, when I went to Temple University in '66, the University of Pennsylvania in '70, in public policy analysis, this same argument had been going on, whether there should be a strong mayor government or whether there should be a weak one. Since that time, I work with around the country to see weak mayoral structures, city manager structures, and a number of other ones. Actually, you could actually go to the municipal league and look it up. So in many respects, this is more of an academic argument than anything else. So there's a song called that Roberta Flack sang that's called "Compared to What." So this power that we're talking about, compared to what? Compared to whom? The idea is that, in my opinion, it's those entities that control jobs, those entities that provide for decent places for people to live. Just two examples. So the question would be, who has that power? And I would suggest that it's neither the mayor nor the city council. I would suggest that it is the Greater Baltimore Committee. I would suggest that it is Johns Hopkins University. I would suggest that it is all the other the regional banking system that's here located in Baltimore, Maryland. Those persons, those entities make that decision, or influence that decision. How can this be resolved? Okay, so one way it can be resolved is through struggle, organized struggle. And I think, what does that mean? If we look at history, we see that all of the major changes that have been made in Baltimore, have been made all over the United States, have not been the result of somebody voting for somebody else. So I guess the question would be, why do you think that a stronger or weaker government or weaker mayoral structure is going to do any particular good, especially if you ask the citizens in Baltimore, not just the citizens in Baltimore, but the working people in Baltimore, mostly whom are, in 2015, it was unorganized struggle. And there were changes that were made, but not quite enough. So how can the conditions of working people, of especially black and working people in Baltimore City, because that's who we're talking about, what difference does it make if there's a strong mayor or a weak mayor?
Okay.
I can answer that question with a prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of things that are difficult and wrong about the larger society that Baltimore is just one part of. And those changes need to be made at a national level for the entire country. And there was a point when I was younger where that was my goal. My goal was to go into politics, go into national government, and fix those problems at that level. I'm not doing that. I'm here in Baltimore. I don't want to leave. I don't want to go be in Washington. I think it's well, I won't go into that. We're on TV. All right, but here in Baltimore, there are things that we can fix at this level. And so I do want to make those changes. Every year or two, somebody publishes a list of the 50 most powerful people in Baltimore, and it's always entertaining to me how far down on that list is anyone who's actually elected to public office, okay? But then I remember that list is not published by government. That list is published by a magazine. And that magazine is a private entity. And it sells ads. And who does it sell ads to? Government? No. It sells ads to companies, the private sector. And so is it a surprise that the people they think are powerful are their customers? I don't think that's surprising. I'm a councilman. My customers are the people who live in the 4th District. I think they're pretty powerful. I think they represent a 14th of all the people in the city. And I think it's our responsibility, not just our as city council members, but as anybody who lives here in Baltimore, it's our responsibility to do everything we can to make Baltimore as right as we can make it. Can we change the tax structure for the federal government? No. Can we change the way that income has been ridiculously concentrated over the last several decades? We can't change that on a national level, but here in Baltimore, we can make changes to our government, and I think we should.
Okay.
Well, I think,
Is it?
yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say, I think that's an excellent question, but I do think government does have power. Baltimore has a $2.9 billion budget. And from that budget flows public goods, items like policing, items like parks and rec, items like schools. And we have the power to allocate, if we weakened the mayor, if we democratized the way that we allocate our budget, including bringing about participatory budgeting, because I think unlike my panel mates here, I'm suggesting there should be 3 entities, the mayor, the council, and the people. And that's where I think in that third entity, if we do 10% of the budget, and there's the budget again, towards Baltimore neighborhood reparations, and you have neighborhood councils that are elected to decide how that money gets spent in those red line communities, now you have people that are involved in allocating $290 million, how that's split up among the red line communities in the city. So I think we shouldn't minimize the way that government and our taxes go towards paying their salaries and paying for the public goods that they have been charged with administering. But I would say we need to broaden the people who are making those budgetary decisions so that it includes the people.
Okay.
And in closing, let me just say this, and I agree with what you're saying, but I would switch the order. It should be the people first, then government. And if within that structure, if most of us would think that way and put the people first, then we don't have to necessarily have a weak or strong mayor, because you need to have people that are going to have leadership and vision and understand the people that you serve. And we don't have the time now, but at some later point, I'd like to talk about a really good example, because right now we have people who are leaving the city because of crime, grime in schools, et cetera. And so we have areas of the city where we have vacant properties. And we came up with a concept of a housing bank, a land bank, because the city doesn't have a lot of money, even though we had the 2.9 billion, because you still got to look at a whole host of other factors going on, but we have property and we have land. And that's where we need to make that exchange in order to strengthen those communities and neighborhoods. But that's an example of where certain power was going to be taken away from certain entities within city government, and it died because one department, one elected official didn't want to give up one of their agencies in order to help to create a stronger neighborhood over in Sandtown potentially. Because if you can give the land to somebody, here, I'm going to give you this land, you got to give me a plan, you leverage this at the bank. And so that's how we work for people and vision and leadership.
I'm from the streets. I'm an ex-felon. I'm a convict. So I'm speaking for ex-felons, people that got caught up with Governor O'Malley's stop and frisk and zero tolerance. I'm here. Me and Mayor Dixon spoke about this before she came up to the stand. I'm a founding member of the Baltimore Block. I'm also a member of Out for Justice. I unpaid lobbyist in Annapolis. And my thing is, city council and the mayor, y'all let 650,000 people get locked up with zero tolerance stop and frisk and permitted it. Mayor and city council permitted it. Y'all wrote the laws to incarcerate us. The same way that Bill Clinton wrote the 92 crime plan, and y'all still incarcerating us. The city mayor nor the city council is talking about ending the war on drugs. And every year you come up with a new crime plan to lock up another generation of black people in Baltimore. All right? Now, we ain't nobody on that city council, nobody in that mayor's office, except I think Dorsey said end the war on drugs. That's a failed war on drugs, and Baltimore been feeding that penitentiary plantation for the last 30, 40 years. You have a contract with the prison industry in which you have to give black bodies to that prison industry. So what is the mayor and the city council going to do about ending the war on drugs and feeding that prison industry? We traded the penitentiary for the plantation, cotton for cocaine, and we still the cash crop.
All right, that's the question.
Black butterfly?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Mic check.
Anybody want to answer that?
Well, my thing is I will go to the budget again, because we are spending over $500 million on the police. And that is setting up a police state. The police have a war room. And there's a term you used earlier, tour of duty. You know, if you listen to the language, it feeds into that complex. So I think I would go towards reducing the budget of the Baltimore Police Department and looking at how we can make policing, well, I want to think about and I would dismantle and shut down the Baltimore Police Department and start the Baltimore Peace Building Authority in its place, so that we have much more of a peace building, public health approach to actually get to the root of a lot of crime, because we know a lot of crime is based on lead poisoning, people having trauma, and they don't need a jail cell to deal with that. They need public health.
And they use the war on drugs as an excuse to exasperate that. I can't get housed and I can't get jobs.
Right.
So you destined me to keep fighting this war on drugs. I'm an enemy combatant.
Right.
So
I'm not Osama bin Laden.
I know Stephen and Tara have heard me say this a number of times, so they're probably tired of it. But when I first started working for Mary Pat in City Hall, we spent $165 million on the police department, and we spent about $38 million on rec and parks. And over the last, not quite yet, 30 years, the whole city budget has more than doubled. The police department's budget has way more than tripled. And we spend about the same we do now as we did then on Parks and Rec. And I've been saying this for my whole time on the council, that we have to start treating public safety as something where we're not just expecting to police ourselves safe. We have to start investing in our kids from the beginning so that they're growing up to not be in a position where anybody's trying to catch them for anything. And the city council, I don't know that I could say the city council's created any kind of great crime plan or anything in the last 10 years, but in the last 10 years, I can tell you, we have fought to bring law enforcement assisted diversion to Baltimore. A whole point of which is that when police officers see people who are breaking the law in some way, the police officers are trained to recognize whether or not the reason they're breaking the law has to do with some type of missing service. And so if they meet these qualifications, the police officer is trained to connect them with case management. Maybe they're homeless and they need a place to live. Maybe they're addicted to something and they need drug treatment. If what they're doing is being done because of some lack of human service that government and nonprofits could be providing, if they would be willing to be connected with that service, they would not go into the criminal justice system. They would not be arrested. They would instead go into case management. I think that's a positive. I think that that would be a better way to address that kind of situation. And that is something that we have tried to encourage the administration, tried to get the police department to do. It is hard from the perspective of the city council when, as the council, we can't require that money be spent on anything unless the mayor agrees.
My name's Kim. I've probably spent more time observing our government than any other citizen in this city. My observations lead me to believe that the processes that we do have under a dictatorial mayoralship are all broken. They are self-serving and not citizen-serving. The fact that we have a board of ethics that doesn't do what it was designed to do is a problem. You know, for a couple of years, I was the only one reviewing ethics forms, and they got so pissed at me that they decided to scan them in and require that anybody that reviewed them had to sign and date when you reviewed a public official's forms. I'm saying I'm proud of that, okay? But that didn't go far enough, okay? The other thing is when we have opportunities for our elected representatives in the council to work on our behalf, you're right, you don't have the power, the knowledge, or the authority. So one of the things that we need, and even Mayor Pugh said this, comparing the city council to the state legislature that has an entire reference department in Annapolis that does research on legislation, on bills, on expenditures by the government to inform the decision-making of the council, to inform the public of what's going on. I would definitely propose some charter amendments to change the way we do business. I think any procurement that is going to expend $25 million or more needs to go before the council, needs to have evidence to support that, data to support. You know, I'm a firm believer in data-driven decision-making. We don't do that. We leave that all up to the mayor. We had, Port Covington conversations around this TIF. And there was information that went into providing the mayor information about that decision that the public nor the council ever got access to. Why is that? Why are we spending hundreds of millions of dollars without more transparency? I want a transparent government. So whatever changes are made to the charter have to be about transparency and inclusiveness and democratizing our government to serve us and not serve corporate interests. We don't do that right now. And, I would very much welcome a board of estimates that does what the former mayor described, right? That provides the check and balance to the items on the agenda. The agenda for tomorrow's board vote came out yesterday. There's some crap on that agenda that ought to be put on pause, right? But there's nobody that's going to do that. There's nobody that's going to say, stop the vote until we get more data. And then we need to have a conversation with the public as to whether that's what they want or not, right? That never happens, right? So I'm looking at my elected representatives and I'm saying, how do I give you, Bill Henry, the wherewithal to do that for me?
You didn't. You live in the 8th district.
Yeah, well.
Okay, but is that your question?
Are we willing to engage in the nitty-gritty of change, right?
Yes.
Right? And if so, you're right. We got another year, and that's what we've got to do. So are you calling council hearings so that we can get down to the nitty-gritty? I want an improved ethics board. I want an improved legislative services department. I want to change the threshold on where the mayor can authorize expenditures. She can authorize expenditures up to $25,000. Anything over that requires public disclosure.
Actually, it occurs to me that the thing that we have not, the thing we have not talked about is the city council and the mayor are not the only way that we can change the charter. Anybody in here who has a good idea for changing the charter and making the charter better in some way, if you believe that that's important and you want to get that idea out in front of the people, and you don't have a council person who's interested in introducing it as a charter amendment legislatively, anybody can just get a petition signed. You get 10,000 names on a petition, and you can put anything on the ballot as a charter amendment.
Councilman, we did talk to interim mayor, and we asked him the question if he supported any charter amendments in terms of reforming the mayor, and he said no. He said he thought it would be self-serving, which didn't really make sense, but nevertheless, just so people know, it probably will take what you're talking about, unless, do you think the council can act unilaterally?
But even if the acting mayor does not agree, the city council still has the authority to get legislation through and have it passed and override the veto if they truly believe that.
That's going
and
to take
they
a lot of
all
people.
are on the same page, and that's what I've heard.
So they're on because remember, last time they had that opportunity, and you were on that council in 2016 when they didn't do it, when they had a chance to give themselves a power. So do you think the council has the will to, override a veto and pursue this?
Stephen, I really hope so.
Let me
I think
just,
you have a majority.
Yeah.
Keep in mind you have someone who's running for mayor on the city council, so they might be opposed.
Who would that be?
I think you
Brandon
have to wait
Scott?
till they announce it.
Brandon Scott?
I think
I'm unaware that any of my colleagues have announced that they're running for mayor.
Okay, I see you. One second. I just want to say something because you said 10,000 signatures, and it seemed to me to get you need a petition of 20% of the voters.
Yeah, the state is 20%.
Huh? For the city. 10,000 signatures.
Yeah.
So you could change the power of the city council
Yeah, we just did it. We just added the
Changed
Affordable
the
Housing
charter.
Trust Fund.
You could change the charter.
Was done
Charter.
as a charter amendment by petition. We just did this 3 years ago. A coalition of housing advocates worked together and got the necessary signatures and put it on the ballot. 13 years, 12, 14 years
The same thing
before
with
that.
the single member.
Yeah, the single member districts that we have right now, that was done by a coalition of Acorn and the League of Women Voters. They, and so here's the other thing. I'm not saying that's easy. I mean, that was a lot of work, not just in terms of physically going out and getting the signatures, standing at supermarkets and farmers markets and parks and anywhere that people gather. It's a lot of work to get the signatures, but then you also need to have people actually campaign for it. You need to have people going to community meetings, calling community association presidents and getting on their monthly agendas so that you can stand up in front of a couple dozen neighbors and explain why they should vote yes for this charter amendment. And I'm not saying it's not a lot of work, but hey, if you want to do something and you think it's important, it's not going to be something that you're going to get by sitting at home watching TV complaining that things aren't better.
I want to address one point that Ms. Trueheart raised on the privatization piece. Well, on the piece of transparency, and I think we have these quasi-governmental privatized organizations that we would have to deprivatize to get to more of that transparency. The Baltimore Development Corporation, East Baltimore Development Incorporated, EBDI, University of Maryland Medical System. We've privatized a lot of our development and systems, and that strips us of accountability and transparency. So I think we need to make those private institutions public. And I think that's a way to also get to your point.
Okay. Hi, I'm E.R. Ship. I have a suggestion maybe for the Real News. Is there a city of comparable size to Baltimore that's governed better than Baltimore that could be maybe a model? Because it seems that we're talking as if Baltimore is in a vacuum and is trying to reinvent something, but somebody out there in the United States must be doing something better than Baltimore.
Somebody.
Well,
So that's
Yeah,
that's research for Real News, right?
I would say that one of the things that's hard to do in that kind of research, I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's what criteria do you use to say that the city is like that city? I took 2 trips to Seattle a couple years ago. I wanted to look at a lot of the progressive programs that they were putting in place. One of them we brought home. Like we now have rental inspection and licensure as a proactive thing that came out of seeing that they had started that in Seattle. Seattle is about the same size as us, so it's tempting to look at them and say, well, this is another city our size. Maybe we should structure our government the same way. But when you start drilling down into it, and this is where it's hard to find the research already done, you have to go out and look closely at each city. Seattle's very different from Baltimore. Seattle has 4 Fortune 500 companies in Seattle. We have 1 Fortune 500 company in the state of Maryland.
But there must be another city besides Seattle.
Yeah.
That's grappling
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh is half the size of
similar,
us. But yeah.
And Cleveland, Ohio is similar as well.
St. Louis, Missouri.
And the land bank actually came out of what was going on in Cleveland because they were at a time when they were in a recession, like when I was governor as mayor in a recession, they did the land bank in order to eliminate the vacant properties within Cleveland. So that's a similar.
Hey, Doctor.
One last thing. The hardest part of finding a comparable city to Baltimore is Baltimore is almost unique in terms of not being in a county. The only other city close to our size in America that's not in a county is St. Louis. And they are actually fighting an effort from their county to absorb them right now, which they are not enthusiastic about because the county is substantially whiter and more conservative, and the plan that they're looking at right now would not give any type of city voting right away. It wouldn't be until the next time they figured out how to restructure districts that anyone in the city would get a chance to vote over it. So there are lots of other cities that we look at and we try to compare ourselves to, but at a very basic level, all of them are in counties, and the county does some amount of the work that the people are used to. And here in Baltimore, we are a city and a county, and that makes us fundamentally different.
What I want to know for the next time we come back, which is like the first Tuesday of May, which is May 7th, we want to know what kind of story should we be covering between now and then, what should we be looking into, and what should we have as a program then? Unless something gigantic and amazing happen between now and May 7th, we want some input. We want some input.
I'm reminded of a story by John Henrik Clark, and he talked about how the Roman citizens would say to each other, "Carthage must fall," and the reply would come, "Yes, citizen, Carthage must fall." And so, since I'm reading a book on the Combahee River Collective, I was reminded about the internationalism that Malcolm and Martin would have us recognize on a regular basis and have it become part of our fundamental discussions. And every day I wake up, I'm reminded of this evil, which is fascism, which is taking over the entire world again, making an attempt again. And so I would like for that discussion that happens in May to focus on the fascism, the international evil, which is attempting to relegate the masses to slavery, basic slavery.
All right, next. No. Oh, you work here.
I'm soldier, right?
Right,
I'm
okay.
the real news. And what our motto is that the future depends on knowing. So I'm saying, how do we go get the suffering folks of Baltimore and let them understand that 10,000 signatures could possibly change their fate? That's what I'm interested in. The people who suffer, who so hard every day, they're trying to adhere to manslaughter, high order needed to survive, to eat and be safe and all that. How can we get them involved? 10,000 signatures is astronomical to them. They don't understand nothing about nothing. And like she spoke about Sandtown, Wilchester, 65% of their police budget just police them. Just Sandtown, that little area in West Baltimore. More people down there on probation, parole, boots on their feet and all that stuff. And anyway, how can we take some of that money and educate those folk that know that their voice matter?
All right, and any other suggestions?
Well, I think you picked it at the beginning with Ms. Shipp. You have to look at other cities, and what I would recommend is that you start with St. Louis. In St. Louis, 2014, after Michael Brown was killed by a police officer, they kicked off a series of very intensive, it was a regional movement, and it started with the Ferguson Commission. Meanwhile, for us, it's been 4 years, and Baltimore City has done nothing. There have been a variety of people doing things, and there have been small things, but we've never had a Freddie Gray Commission. We've never looked at the structure of the region. We've never had something led by Morgan and Hopkins and government and private sector and everybody coming together. So I would recommend looking at that, because then that's your platform to start looking at why are other cities doing better than we are. I mean, this idea that everything has to be special for Baltimore. The only thing that makes Baltimore unique is that we are the city with the largest gap between our potential and our reality. And we're all in this room because we're sick of it. And we're sick of our structure of government. Look at Detroit, look at New York, look at St. Louis, look at what they have done. And we should be copying what they're doing.
Okay. All right. You, sir?
I'd like to go along with what Shorty said. What about ending the drug war? What are the costs, what are the benefits of ending the war on drugs and the war on our people?
Okay. All right, that's good. Okay. One more here. Wait.
Reflecting on what Professor Lawrence said earlier, the impact on public health. We have emerging resistant bacteria. We have a shortage of medication. We have irate prices for medication on how we need to look at the impact of everything on public health in Baltimore. We have an increasing number of black women dying in childbirth in the United States. So we need to start looking at the impact of all of this on public health in Baltimore, as well as the state of Maryland.
Okay. All right, so we got one more right over on that other side in there.
Yes, I want to just simply piggyback on what this gentleman right here in the Real News, what he had to say. I think when I listened to all of what I heard, when it comes to talking about charter amendments, when it comes to talking about the city council, when it comes to talking about the mayor, I think when it comes to the city, when it comes to nationally, we are not educated, and we need to be educated. We need to be educated not when it's time to elect somebody, because when you elect somebody, too many times what I'm seeing is you're electing personalities, and you don't have the information that you need. We're talking about going back to civics, and it's like how many of us are enlightened as to how our city runs. And I think we need to become more and more educated, and I would like to see the city council and all of the people who we have elected take a part in that, in educating us, so that we can make informed decisions when it comes to whether or not we want to re-elect you or anybody else. So I think it begins with us. It begins, like what Michael Jackson said, it begins with me in terms of educating myself. And I think as a society, local body, national body, we need to become more educated so that we can make informed decisions.
Every ballot is a multiple choice test. That's right. And you do better on a test when you study.
Okay, we got a couple minutes, and my mandate was to find out, what do you think about this process we're doing? We're going to keep this going. We want to support IDBs, but we also want to give the community and the population here in the city a continuous forum where they can come together, they can talk, they can start interacting. They might even, I mean, the fact that 10,000 signatures can change the charter, it's an important piece of information that I found out, because I was thinking 60, 70,000. 10,000, that's good. Things can be changed. We can do 10,000 within the next year. So we can actually figure out what changes we need to make, and we can actually start. And that's how you engage the citizens anyway. If you do that, you'll start engaging people and they'll become more educated, more conscious, and so on, right? But what you're really invited to is May 7th to be back here in Ida B's so that we can continue this discussion and we can discover comrades and allies that can work together to maybe make some changes for 2020. So I want to thank, and I want everybody to thank the panel. Appreciate it.